Right now, I'm in an actual living environment. I've started to calm down a bit. There's no screaming or yelling. When there is, there's so much laughter and happiness here. I mean, the last few days have been a lot different. I've made a few phone calls. People aren't getting back to me as usual, but I still made them. I still made the effort. I want to talk today about victims in a not so loving environment. There's a song by Pink called Family Portrait. A lot of us didn't grow up with, good parents. I know a lot of the stuff that I complain about is white people problems and first world problems, and you're darn right it is. Electronic devices, when most of the evidence is on electronic devices, yeah, you need first world electronic devices, first world issues that you got to deal with in order to contend with this modern age where people just omit evidence and it makes everything okay. I'll show the truth. No matter what, that's the goal. I want to talk about normalizing. A lot of the places that I've been, the victims, they're forced to normalize with their predators. They're forced to play for the camera. I see all these people's Facebooks all chock full of what they're trying to portray their family as. I have the perfect family. Meanwhile, I got private messages between me and a lot of these people that show that a lot of them were being molested or beaten in those very same families. But y'all never get to see that. We're all just supposed to stuff our problems. It's always somebody else's problem. And then we gotta go to the suicides. Money is the number one reason for people committing suicide, folks. Here in the United States. Number one reason for divorces is money. And the number two reason for suicides is divorce, losing your family, losing your children. A lot of people, they get divorced over abuse, and then both parents end up struggling, and they end up doing desperate things because they're in desperate situations when they could have dealt with it like adults. At some point in time, we have to have arbiters who can sit between two warring parties who don't want to be at war. I didn't want to be at war with Natalie. Natalie didn't want to be at war with me. It was a bunch of people that had opinions that it was none of their business. It's all right for me to be friends with my heroes. It's also okay for me to leave those relationships. But it's not. It's not, is it? It's not safe for you to leave those relationships. It's not safe for you to say, all right, I don't want to be friends with that person anymore because of this. Because they're not any good for me. A lot of victims of sexual assault, most of the time that's within the family. 80% of the time or more, it's one of the parents. Between 80 and 85% of child pornography comes from the foster care system here in the United States. Think about that. We've got judges, lawyers, teachers, and doctors across the United States being arrested all the time for their involvement in these things. And when a victim comes forward, you treat them like they've got conspiracy theories and they must be mental. And then when it happens to you, you want their help. You got no idea how many people have asked for my help since all of this happened. I help out the ones I can the best I can. But the America that we live in today, we're trying to put on a family portrait of a nation that doesn't exist. We have victims too ashamed, embarrassed, and afraid of public opinion to come forward. Victims who are forced to normalize to make their families happy. Dad molested you, you tell mom, mom won't hear you, she calls you a liar. One of these young women, her mother was addicted to cocaine, and her dad is addicted to methamphetamines. He couldn't keep his hands to himself, and although I had told this mother of this young woman a story that, well, it turned out to be her story too, where the mother ignored the daughter or called her a liar or just refused to believe that her companion, her husband, would do a thing like that. He would. And that young woman will be forced to normalize with that man for as long as her mother is with that man. And that's happened on several occasions, believe it or not, since Natalie disappeared. It's also happened on hundreds of occasions before, that I'm aware of. That the victim has to normalize because the doctors at the institutions won't listen to you. Back in the 1980s, I didn't have this first world problem computer, but that computer allows me to save evidence, where in the 1980s I had nothing. I had the drugs that they fed me and the groups where they wouldn't listen. When you tell those people in those institutions what your parents did to you, you're hoping that they'll do their jobs, what they're supposed to do, call the police and have something done. But then you're the bad guy because you're the one who's locked up. And you're afraid, most of these girls and boys, they told their mother first. Most of the time it was their dad or their stepdad. And they would tell their mother, and their mother didn't believe them, and they never went to the police. Too afraid to. You need someone to go in with you. That's a very scary situation. And for an entire year before Natalie died, I was trying to get that help. But then everywhere I went, it turned out they were just eating up taxpayers' dollars and eating up my money for services that don't actually exist. It's just lip service. It's not even a temporary fix. It's not even a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. It's just a show of it. Like someone sat there for 45 minutes airbrushing a Band-Aid on while you're bleeding. I mean, it's just ludicrous the amount of money that we spend to do nothing useful while the victims suffer. And when a good man comes forward, that victim has to look at the situation and assess the situation and say, all right, do I want my family to hate me, or do I let this guy go down for trying to be the good guy? You just want to be loved by your family. I understand that. I wanted to be loved by my family. But my family, unlike my friends, didn't get to know me. They didn't bother, they didn't try. They were addicts too. One of the young women who tries to put on that perfect family portrait along with the rest of her family, she was molested by her sister. And her dad was hitting her. And You know, these were people that I knew before Natalie, or before Natalie died. People want to pretend I'm the bad guy for speaking out. I'm not the bad guy for speaking out. You're the bad guys for making speaking out more punished than committing a crime against someone like that. So that it's more of a crime for me to come forward about your dad molesting you than it is for your dad to actually molest you. I don't always know what the right thing is to do. I mean, who does? Everybody's got their own opinions, right? This environment here, it's positive. There's not a whole bunch of screaming. There's not a bunch of meanness and rudeness and cruelty. For me, it's a lot of time by myself. And, you know, I've spent enough time here to know that this is really where I needed to be 2 years ago. That whole family portrait thing, you know, in a lot of the places that I was at, I did my best to try to maintain that family portrait, try to pretend like everything is happy, pretend like everything is good and great and wonderful. And hopefully if I keep that attitude there, it will be that way. I'll be able to affect my environment at least that much. But then I end up in a lot of environments where people are constantly negative. And that's what I was trying to steer clear of. I mean, there are people that, like Aunt Bee, for example. You know, I'm afraid to talk to her. She used to be a lot more positive person, and then now it's just so much negativity. At least here there's positivity, and that is extremely important. There's also a lot of people that they're not trying to maintain that family portrait. They're saying, you know what, screw that. I'm going to say it like it is. The world needs to know how screwed up this place is. I mean, a homeless person having to spend 60 hours of community service and pay $400 in fines because they got busted sleeping with a blanket on public land for one night. And you guys wonder where all the money goes. Well, it goes to incarcerating people for that. It goes to locking up the homeless rather than going after the predators. It's not okay to be a good man. People made fun of me my whole life. Like, Sean, you don't have to be Captain Save-A-Ho. I'm like, you guys are dumb. It ain't even about her. It's about the kids. It's about those who are stuck in that environment. Stuck in an environment where they are not going to thrive. Stuck in an environment where their future is snorted up someone else's nose. Because that other person is the one with the power. Or they learn the wrong kind of love because they're not being loved right at home. People like Natalie. People like Alicia. People like Maddie Boa. And Mandy Hughes. People like me and people like Rabbit. People like Desiree. So I've been making calls this week. I wasn't able to get up the mountain last week. It's because it's a positive environment. There's no animosity here. There's no undue cruelty. I mean, there are always going to be little problems that you're going to have to hash out. But if there's an issue with the dishes and you want the dishes washed, it takes, 5 minutes to wash the dishes? That's it? No big thing. But it's when you have people who are so obsessed with the drama that they want to argue about the dishes long after they've been washed. Just continually bring it up and grind it in and grind it in and grind it in and grind it in. It gets to a point where we just have to take it. And I refuse to live by that.